The further travails and trials uh, of degeneration or Entartung. So I'm going to ask the question, has Heidegger adopted Nietzsche to the extent that his special task, as I see him presenting it, is to negotiate with the technological essence, which means the science is taken as a specific form of mastery of the moving environment, and such that the actual becomes that which is in a direct relationship to energy as that which can be unleashed, like that at the core of the atom, or like the fuel that's sitting in the so-called, according to the Western side, the shadow fleet. They say it's a shadow fleet, then the media repeats it. They have a certain law. Not all countries agree that it's a shadow fleet. Maybe it's just a fleet bearing oil. We have here in Nietzsche this maybe we could thematize it as a kind of a third definition of tragedy, and in fact Nietzsche re-released his book on his early book on the birth of tragedy with a new subtitle having to do with pessimism and Entartung. Aristotle's version is something, it's very long, it's something like a serious and completed mimesis or imitation of an action. Well, that's misstated, sort of. An action that's serious and complete, and a mimesis of it. With using seasoned or as it were, well-keyed terminology, and resulting somehow in a catharsis. This isn't meant to, so I mean Aristotle, we shouldn't take Aristotle to be talking about the drama in the sense that either Ibsen or Strindberg understood drama as, especially as a battlefield of the political motion, but rather, according to Aristotle, this would be a crystallization of Sophia itself, of a glance at Sophia itself. So if we could see through if we could see such an action, a serious and complete action, and be moved by it, then we would enter into the truth. And then Nietzsche's saying the truth turns out to be something that always, like life, it always must be self-overcoming itself. Otherwise it's drags one down, otherwise it's deadly. And therefore one must do this sort of, find new techniques, like the fast cooling technique of metals, which allows the crystallization not to happen. If you cool, say, steel, and just let it cool by itself under certain conditions where that can happen in a mold. There's a crystallization according to so-called nature, so-called truth. But if you use the fast cooling technique, then the molecules don't reach that final state, and then you get a different sort of quality of the metal. The molecules are in a different form. So likewise, we could again we formulate again in Hegel, right, another attempt at a scientific version of what tragedy is. This time, it's closer to the problems that Nietzsche and Heidegger are dealing with, in that it's tragedy for Hegel is this contest of the views that have somehow both have a plausible or even equal claim, and they have to come into a contest somehow. I mean, that Socrates and somehow introduced something that he calls the truth. So is Nietzsche trying to fight Socrates here too, is another thing. Nietzsche trying to overcome Socrates. But at the other hand, his critics, who comprise the cave, I think when Socrates talks about the first critics, that means really all the rumors going around the cave. And then he says, there's no way I can in a short time debunk all my first accusers, because his first accusers are just the gossip, the hive of fast yellow sparking wings that move so fast he can't really do anything about them, and they're buzzing all over the place. But his second accusers say, you have ruined the Athenian youth, you perverted the youth with your teachings, with your Orphic teachings, as it were, that there's only one theos, and thereby throwing us into chaos. If Nietzsche's saying here now in his third, so I'll put the citations so you could look at it better, and it's also striking that Nordau has been Nordau with his magnificent beard, it's sort of curling in both directions, and he looks a little bit at the stout build of Sully Prudhomme or somebody like that. Was so he was all everywhere socially. He was in touch with the most advanced circles, so he knew the Nietzsche circles before. So he had access to this, which, for instance, Heidegger's putting at the head of his interpretation of Nietzsche, unpublished works on these unpublished notes on the Wille on the will to power, on the exact notion of Entartung. So Nietzsche took even the title exactly, lifted it directly from Nietzsche, even though he's zealously and sort of sputteringly maligning Nietzsche constantly in his accounts of Nietzsche in the very book that's named Entartung after Nietzsche's concept. And he was also in close contact with, or at least he knew personally, Nietzsche's sister, Elizabeth Foster Nietzsche. So this is very amazing, frankly. And it causes me also to wonder to what extent we can now, and we know Karl Popper has repeated the same game. He's lambasted Nietzsche just as did Nordau before him, but Karl Popper was educated in the 1920s or so, I think, in Vienna, and when Nietzsche was already sort of been around a long time, so he's kind of late on the scene. And I mean, when there had already been generations of people, Simmel, Weber, and many others who were directly the students the thought of Nietzsche. Not to say that they accepted Nietzsche's teaching, but that they were influenced by parts of it and decisively directed by parts of it. And here's Nietzsche's. Let's just say this is Nietzsche's definition of tragedy. His definition of tragedy is that truth should crystallize, and that instead of art breaking it down and defeating it and going ahead of it, tragedy occurs when words and truths take only one definition and become dogmatic. And so this is, I think, it's just interesting to superimpose this over the whole question of Hayek and Soros and all these things, and over the whole economic issues, for instance. We get a situation, so picture the following situation. Alan Greenspan says, the problem is with the Volcker Act and Dodd-Frank and all the things that made the ordinary, like a lot of small investors lost money in the mortgage thing, right? So people were happy to say, oh, there must be these regulations. But then what Greenspan says is the real situation is totally different than what they keep making us think with their crystallized formulas, with their claims that there's a Phillips curve, where there's clean, and that we can adjust things accordingly and keep the employment rate in the right. This itself strikes me as just sinister to some people, and it's published all the time on the daily news, just deciding how many people should be employed, what the proper level of full employment is, and what the proper corresponding, because if more people are employed, then there's more money, more demand, and then that means the same thing as inflation, more or less. You could define inflation differently, but it means that if there's a lot of money around, people in stores put the prices up because they know that they're going to get somebody to buy it, and that amounts to inflation. Just that things like that are being decided on the basis of a crystallized theory, which then, as Nietzsche is showing us, this is tragedy if it's allowed simply to hold still this type of theory of the very theory that macroeconomics exists. In other words, that this metaphysical domain of making permanent so-called rational predictions within a changing Lebensraum, or within a room that's, the term was taken over by the Nazis and made to mean the same thing as Grossraum, but originally it was a term of Friedrich Ratzel, who was a geographer, and I think I forget what his proper title is. Maybe almost a sociologist, something in that direction. But if tragedy is is letting the normal cooling of the steel occur, instead of innovating, suddenly we have to rush in and negotiate with this situation, so that now we'll have the slow cooling, and the truth won't crystallize in the same way. But in the same way, Greenspan's saying, now we have this situation where if you do the Volcker Act and all these things, what happens is markets like Singapore then pick up the slack, because then they say, look at the regulations, how there's 20,000 pages to these type of things, and it's just the money that you have to spend just to even know what the regulations are is very large. And for whichever reason, this could cause the other markets that don't have the exact same rules, and this goes even for the London market, and for not to say for the people settled in the Basel system, where basically their idea is we could push the limit to where there's a limit where there couldn't be a bailout because it would be too big to, not too big to fail, but too big to bail out. It would just crush everything. So we should push it right to the edge of that limit is sort of what the Basel people do. So if that's your opponent, that's like, and they're offering something else, Greenspan saying, we don't know really if this is gonna be really bad for America if we like let instead the Council of Basel, which if you look at their building, it looks basically like the Spectre building. Their meeting hall, or like the Dr. Strangelove, whatever, more like Spectre, I think. But if basically behind all these innovations of crystallizations of new truths, of regulations that should stand forever and are the truth, there's this moving sort of ground of questions where the science of it, and that's like Popper also, he invented a new notion of science, which was meant, the stupid version is totally meaningless, I think. Formally it's meaningless, or it's like, it has no sense to it that we don't believe in verification, something is finally crystallized, but we believe in falsification. But this means exactly that it's crystallized as false. Something is finally crystallized. So either way, it's a form of knowledge. It might be negative with respect to the thing you're trying to prove, but that's sort of arbitrary. It could be regarded as positive, as a building block for some other project. But what Popper was really getting at is, rather than this simple notion that sciences have to fit the amount of exactness, the Aristotle thing, that's proper to them, and therefore if you fetishize physics as the fundamental science, you miss the boat. And then he just tried to give a simple rule for when you're doing something more like when you're treating economics as a science or law as a science, or these they're the same. Economics and law are the same in this sense that the regulations are directly part of the competition. One state regulates one way, another state another way, and money is directed as supposedly in theory to the more efficient one, but it's an arbitrary theory. It could be. That's just easily crystallizable generalization that could be torn down. So, but in any case, all this stuff I just want to superimpose over the sense that art or tech, we say that the economist is a technician, a lawyer is a technician. Techne, this is a grasp of certain fields and how to wield them, must constantly be avoiding the crystallization of being treated as reality, right? So that's this point is constantly made in a weak form by saying naturalization or reification, but it's always kind of unclear what that actually means, or it's so clear that it nonpluses people. It's better to show the specific examples where here's the notion comes in the 50s of macro-micro split, for instance, so that metaphysics can come in. And then we could understand each time a big metaphysical question rises up, it's as though the society we're facing up to its highest question, and according to Heidegger, this highest question is in Socrates, something like that the good implies that which makes the people better understood as justice, as decay, and that because we can show points of improvement with respect to decay, or that which improves the citizens, such as having the law only known to a few or having the law publicly promulgated, is supposed to be a genuine improvement, then you can say the problems resulting from this basis are problems that have held sway for a long time in the West. Whereas Heidegger's saying now what's holding sway in the heart of the West to a great degree is the accelerationist cybernetic problem. So that here, I think, basically it's like a Nietzschean thing where if current understandings of what the technological essence are allowed to crystallize without a negotiation by incurring into them, and understanding that it's artificial to try to break it up between the interpretations of the technological essence that are directly efficacious or doing something, and the ones that are just supposedly standing there as explanations, like the Aztecs gave to themselves of, oh, why are we emulating people on the top of the temples? It's because we have to feed the sun. We have to feed the Quetzalcoatl or something. As though, to treat words as just interpretations, it you see Nietzsche's point is that's how it's an incursion into the practices. So I think there's something Nietzschean in Heidegger's saying we should do this Auseinandersetzung or incursion into the practice of interpreting the technological essence, as he called it, where he says the technological essence doesn't think. I think technological essence and science are the same thing. So we could say he's saying the technological essence doesn't think. It's a blind Zizek'ian thing. And then, we could try to do the fast cooling technique or something on it.